Welcome to this interview series. My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and I have the great honor to interview today Ronja Kirschning from the ESCP Business School, Jean-Baptiste Institute in Berlin, in Germany. Welcome, Ronja, and thank you very much for joining us for this interview series.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Christina. It's my pleasure to participate in this.
So Ronja is going to give us more insight on her article published in Small Business Economics in June 2022. The paper is entitled "The Role of Entrepreneurial Absorptive Capacity for Knowledge Spillover Entrepreneurship." This paper is co-authored with her colleague Matthias Mrożewski from the same university, ESCP Business School, Jean-Baptiste Institute in Berlin. So Ronja, I would like to start my first question. Could you please tell us briefly, what is your article about?
Yes, of course. I'm happy to say a few words about the paper. So we are looking, as the title already suggests, at the knowledge spillover theory of entrepreneurship. And this theory suggests that incumbent organizations generate knowledge through R&D activities, but are sometimes either unwilling or unable to use that knowledge for different reasons. So for example, a misfit with their core product or resource constraints. And then this unused knowledge may spill over to entrepreneurs who commercialize it and thereby contribute to economic growth. And this theory assumes that there is this positive relationship between knowledge and entrepreneurial activity. However, in the literature, we actually find that there are contradictory findings. So most studies find this positive relationship. However, there are also other studies who can't find this positive relationship, or even so find no relationship or even a negative one. And with our study, we actually resolve these contradictory findings that we found and show that the direction of this relationship, so knowledge stock and entrepreneurial activity, actually depends upon the entrepreneurial absorptive capacity. So that's the ability of entrepreneurs to understand and exploit knowledge. And yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell what the paper is about. So resolving this paradox that I just described.
Great. Can you tell us why this topic, why this article is important, and what we learned from this article that we didn't know before?
Mm-hmm. So I think the findings of our paper or our article are important because we reconcile this paradox that is currently in the KSTE literature by showing that the effect of knowledge stock on entrepreneurial activity is actually contingent upon the level of entrepreneurial absorptive capacity. So we show that in countries with high levels of entrepreneurial absorptive capacity, so where entrepreneurs can actually have the ability to understand, commercialize, and exploit knowledge, the relationship is positive. And in countries where there's low levels of entrepreneurial absorptive capacity, this relationship is negative. So our results kind of demonstrate that a high level of entrepreneurial absorptive capacity is a boundary condition for the knowledge spillover theory of entrepreneurship. So that's kind of, I think, one like the main finding of our article. Yeah.
Great. Can you share with us where did this idea came up? How did you get this idea for this research?
Yes, that's a good question. So I think so. I don't remember how I got to the knowledge spillover theory, but it was just in my head that I wanted to write a paper about it. And I had a very close look at the literature, and then I first, after I don't know a couple of weeks, I stumbled across these different findings, and I remember I was super surprised because I thought, okay, that the theory totally makes sense. Why are there these different findings? I couldn't really wrap my head around it. And that kind of motivated me to dive further into the literature and think about, okay, what other factors may impact this spillover mechanism? What are there maybe any conditions that have to be met so that this spillover mechanism actually takes place? And that's while thinking about that, I obviously also read further in the literature, and then I stumbled across the entrepreneurial absorptive capacity theory, which actually says that entrepreneurs need to be able to, or need the ability to understand, exploit, and commercialize knowledge. And I thought, okay, it totally makes sense. If you don't have that ability, how is that unused knowledge going to translate into knowledge spillover entrepreneurship? So that's kind of how the whole idea emerged. So we saw these, or I saw these contradictory findings, and then we tried to resolve it, and found the entrepreneurial absorptive capacity theory, and then yeah, it actually worked.
Great. Can you tell us what is next? Where do you see, for example, the research on this topic going? What are your new ideas? You have the next steps for you?
Yes, of course. So we operationalized entrepreneurial absorptive capacity through the measure educational quality, which was actually an aggregate of 3 different submeasures. So the quality of math education, the quality of science education, and the quality of reading education. And I think here it would be super interesting to kind of examine if there are differences between the different kinds of education. So kind of doing a more detailed analysis of maybe subjects that are being taught, and seeing which of these subjects actually matter the most for knowledge spillover entrepreneurship. I think that would be really cool, so that we kind of can give more detailed advice also to, for example, policymakers, to kind of see which topics specifically need to be supported if their goal is to encourage knowledge spillover entrepreneurship. So I think that would be a very interesting point that I'm definitely planning to look further into. And next to that, I think it would also be interesting to kind of look at the countries that have this low level of entrepreneurial absorptive capacity that I was talking about earlier. So where we have this negative relationship, and kind of see if there are other factors that maybe impact this knowledge spillover mechanism. So yeah, I think that would be another very interesting point to look at.
Great. Can you tell us how you can apply your findings? For example, do you have any advices or any insight for practitioners?
Yes, definitely. So I think what our results mean for practitioners is that investments in knowledge stock may not necessarily be sufficient for a country to encourage entrepreneurial activity. So instead, it's also important to keep in mind that the entrepreneurial absorptive capacity plays a role in this spillover process. So if entrepreneurs or economic actors, if they don't have the skills to understand and commercialize knowledge and turn that into a venture, then this unused knowledge stock will just stay unused, and it just kind of goes to waste. So I think policymakers should not only focus their attention on like increasing knowledge generation within a country, so the R&D investments, but also on increasing the level of entrepreneurial absorptive capacity. And they can do that, for example, by increasing the quality of educational institutions that focus on equipping entrepreneurs with the necessary skills to be able to understand, exploit, and commercialize knowledge. So I think that's one advice we have for practitioners.
Great. Arriving towards the end to this interview, I was wondering whether you have any last comments or any advices or any anecdotes probably related to this article, or even some advices for the readers of this article?
That's a good question. Any anecdotes? Yeah, so maybe that's not a long story, but I just wanted to mention again that I remember when I started this this research project, and I kind of tried to understand why there are these different findings. I was like, because I read about the theory, and I just remember there are not that many papers that find this negative relationship or no relationship, but there are definitely a few. And I just remember that I really couldn't wrap my head around it. And I was trying for like a really long time to kind of just think about, hey, what could actually contribute to this mechanism? What could be a moderator for that? And yeah, it took me quite some time to kind of like read and think what's the missing piece kind of. And I think, yeah, it was a very interesting process, was a very interesting paper to write. I very much enjoyed it.
Thank you very, very much for joining us today and for sharing your insights on this paper and contribution. For me, I encourage our readers to follow your paper and download your paper from the website of Springer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. It was a pleasure.